It's March 3rd, 2020. The administrative officers of Mount Union University, Dean Fisher and Michelle Gaffney, were out of the office for some work. When they returned to the office, they checked for any calls and found a voice note from Mrs. Brenda Powell about discussing her daughter's progress with the university. They immediately called her back at 12:36 p.m., and she answered the phone. "Hello, miss. This is Dean Fisher, the administrative officer of the university. This is Brenda Powell, mother of Sidney Powell." The administrator asked her if he could help her with something, to which Brenda kept silent for a while, as if she was gathering courage to say it. The administrator repasted hello a few times just to make Brenda conscious. "Miss, are you there with me?" Brenda reluctantly replied, Yes. I wanted to ask about my daughter's enrollment in the university. Is she?" She was hesitant to hear the answer. "Has she dropped out or something?" The administrator put the phone off speaker and started to check the details about Sidney Powell on the computer. After a long pause, he replied, "Yes, she has dropped out, madam." Just as the administrator uttered these words, something shocking happened. It startled not only Dean Fisher but also his colleague Michelle Gaffney, who stood up from her seat and came closer to the phone. It was a scream, followed by a loud thud. They tried to connect with the lady and asked her again and again if she was there. While they were on the phone, they heard another thud followed by louder screams. It happened so fast and continuously that they could recall around 6-7 louder and louder thuds before the call was disconnected. Both of them fell silent in shock. They looked at each other and, after regaining consciousness, called on the number again. This time there was no response. They called again, yet no response. It was the third time when the call was received. However, they sensed something wrong. "Who is this?" they asked. The voice on the other side of the phone answered Brenda. "It does not sound like Brenda," the administrator protested and added, "You sound like Sidney. Are you there, Sidney?" The phone immediately disconnected and turned off. Brenda K. Powell lived in Ohio since her teenage. She was a successful graduate of Akron University and worked as a child specialist at the Children's Hospital. She has always loved her passion and has always been honest with her work. Her colleagues and friends admired her dedication to the work. It is even said about her that she devotes herself to the families she works with, just as she does to her own family. These empathetic traits are made the most reliable one in her field. She was not only into her work, but also managed the family life. Having a family of 3, she would manage to spend equal time with her family. From the outside of her family, she looked perfect. A loving husband and an intelligent daughter were everything that meant to her. Brenda was a perfectionist kind of an individual and had always wanted her only daughter to do the best in life as she did. Her husband, Steve Powell, has termed her as the calm and composed one in the family, who could handle all sorts of situations quite easily, since she was a practiced counselor too. Powells had their only daughter named Sidney. Sidney has been an intelligent girl since her childhood. Having studied at St. Vincent and St. Mary High School, she was always great in her studies. Not only the academics, but she was almost as good as perfect at soccer too. He had also maintained good grades at high school and always made her parents proud. It was due to her hard work and dedication that her parents did not force her out of a job or anything. They decided to take the financial burden of her university education on themselves. Fortunately, Sidney was lucky enough to receive a presidential scholarship, which only around 160 people achieved throughout the year. This even lessens the burden of the tuition fee on her parents. The family was very close to each other, and they were each other's best friends. They would share meals, go on vacations, and spend quality time with each other. They were indeed a family to be envied by most. They trusted each other with everything, and one thing that many people may find odd, they used an application called Life360 to track each other at any time. It sounds weird, but that's how it was for them. Sidney had gained the family's trust so much so that her parents did not bother asking about or tracking through the university application about their daughter's performance at college. They trusted her and wanted not to invade her privacy without any solid reason. All was going well for this family. The problems arose when Sidney was admitted to college in the fall of 2018. She was not feeling comfortable in the college. She never actually disclosed the reasons, but a sudden change was observed in her behavior. The summer of 2010, when she got home from the vacation, her parents noticed a strange thing in her behavior. Whenever they would ask her about her studies, she would either change the topic or would answer in a not-so-satisfactory way. But having a previous record of excellence, the Powells did not pay much attention to it. When Sidney came home in the winter of 2019, she looked disturbed. She wanted to have a conversation with her parents, but she could not gather the courage to do so during the whole winter break. Her behavior was not so normal, but her parents thought their daughter must have changed with the exposure of the university. In January 2020, after the vacation, she went back to college and started life as normal. She would spend time with her friend and roommate Lauren. It was when one day she was called to the administrator's office that she realized what bothered her and what she was trying to hide was true. The administrator asked her about her stay at the dorm. They informed her that her dorm card would soon stop working and she must vacate her room since it is against the university rules to reside there without being enrolled in the campus. She could not believe what she just heard. In a state of confusion, she asked the administrator, Michelle, about her enrollment status. Michelle was amazed at her naivety and reminded her that she had signed the expulsion letter herself and that she had been informed of her ousting from the university. Sydney could not believe this, or in fact, she knew it but did not want to believe it. She was expelled from the university. When she got back to the room, her heart was pounding at such a high pace. Her eyes blurred and she felt dumb. This was it. This was the thing that bothered her all the while. She wanted to tell this to her parents, to throw this burden off her chest, but it was her parents' aspirations and expectations that stopped her. She lied to her friend about taking some time to sort her life since she was not feeling well. She packed her stuff and left the hostel. In a state of confusion and frustration, she could not understand where she should go. In a state of despair, she went to a nearby hotel and stayed there for a few days. She spent the whole month of February there, without letting her parents know. She did all the transactions through cash so that her parents wouldn't know about her expulsion from the university. In the meanwhile, the weight of her guilt was getting heavier and heavier on her. In the meanwhile, one day out of nowhere, she received a text that raced her heart so fast that she was about to faint. It was Bredna who complained about her daughter's behavior. She even said that she felt scammed the way Sydney was treating her parents and reminded her that it is only through good grades that she can retain her scholarship and they can afford her studies. Sydney replied to these texts in so decent manner. She also lied to her father when he was trying to log into her university profile, and that was denied again and again. When Steve complained to her about this, she said the website must have been broken and that it might take some time to recover. It was on March 3rd that she decided to finally inform her parents. She came home and stayed there waiting for her parents who were at work. She never knew this would be the day her family would no longer be the same day her father was in his office. It was a normal day at work for him. He had just settled and started writing when he received a call. It was from the Mount Union University. This was a brief call and did not share much information other than the fact that his daughter had been expelled from the university. When he asked for details, they politely apologized and put the receiver down. Steve could not digest what he had just heard and immediately tracked Sydney on his phone. Her location showed that of their home. He left his phone at work so that Sydney could not track his location and went home to confront her about what he had just heard. Sydney denied all this. She tried to convince her father, but even she knew she could not, because she was not a regular liar. Also, she could not lie to her parents since she never did it. It was a hard time for her. However, she did manage to convince her father of a partial lie she just told him. She said to her father that she had faced some difficulty in a few subjects and had only frozen those. She also lied that she had not been dropped out. It was so much for the proud father of an intelligent girl, who throughout her life has done nothing but achieve all sorts of accomplishments. Steve, however, tried to handle the situation and tried to motivate Sydney. He asked her to take a break from her studies. This sweet behavior of her father troubled her even more. She was filled with guilt and was afraid to disappoint the family. It was all about disappointment. She had set a bar so high that she could not afford to lose it now. This troubled her, since Steve was not so good at managing such a crisis. He did what he would later regret all his life. This action of his would haunt the family for the rest of their lives. In confusion, he called Brenda and informed her about the situation. She decided to come home. And that's when Steve left for work again. They remained connected on the text messages and discussed with each other whatever happened. Brenda was a sensible person, and she knew how to manage this situation. She sat on the couch with Sydney and very politely asked her about what happened at the university. She told her the same story of freezing just a few subjects, and that she was not expelled from the university. Brenda knew Sydney was lying, but she did not show it in front of her. She comforted and motivated her and sent her to her room. Sydney headed towards the basement, but something that bothered her was the composure of her perfectionist mother at this breaking news. She could not believe this and did not expect this from her either, so she hid behind the door. When Brenda made sure that she had gone to her room, she dialed her university. It was around 12:36 p.m. when the administrator, Dean Fisher, called her back. Sydney was shocked and in a frenzy. She wanted to stop her. She looked for the way to it, but she could not find one. In a hurry, she went to the kitchen and brought a cast iron pan, an ordinary kitchen utensil. Just as Brenda uttered the words from her mouth, Sydney hit her on her head. Brenda fell to the ground. She hit her again and again, 6-7 times. Brenda was screaming as loud as she could, but there was no one to help. Brenda was unconscious, but Sydney was not in her senses too. She went to the kitchen again, brought the regular steak knife from the kitchen, and stabbed Brenda in the neck. She tried to defend herself, but poor Brenda ended up being stabbed 23 times on different body parts, including her neck, face, shoulders, and arms. Hearing the abnormal voices on the phone, the administrators of the university called again and again. Sydney did not expect this, neither did she prepare for it. She regained her consciousness, and at first, she received the third call from the administrative officers and tried to deceive them, faking Brenda. However, her plan failed, and they recognized her Sydney. It made her escape even worse. She immediately turned the phone off. In the meanwhile, Michelle and Fisher called 911 and told them about the incident. Steve was in his office when he received a call from one of his detective friends about the police receiving a complaint about something unusual at his house. He texted Brenda, and this would be his last ever text to her at 12:41 p.m. He also called at home and asked Sydney about the complaint. She denied any such activity, but was startled at the news of police headed towards their home. She did what would later make her case even worse, and would ultimately lead to severe consequences. She tried to stage the crime scene, making it look like a breaking in. She broke the window from the outside and developed a fake story in her mind. When the police arrived, they found Sydney in a catatonic state. She was lying on the ground in a fetal position. The cast iron pan covered in blood was lying on the floor, and the bloodied steak knife was beside it. The forensics revealed the weapons of murder as mentioned. The police suspected the story of Sydney, and the evidence, along with the statements of Michelle and Fisher, led the investigation in a way that they were in a position to charge her as guilty. This news spread across Ohio and raised many questions. The media also highlighted it, and all the people looked up to the trial. The defense presented its arguments. Nobody in the court ever argued over who committed the murder, but the main point that could influence the judgment was the mental condition of Sydney. The prosecution presented a psychologist and testified that Sydney was diagnosed with unspecified anxiety disorder. He also declared to be in her senses since she was fully aware and stagged the crime scene according to her story. The defense also presented psychologists claiming her to be in a psychotic outbreak, and her fetal position after the murder was evidence of it. They also declared her schizophrenic and pointed to Sydney's statements in which she states not to remember anything related to the murder. She said she either remembers sitting on the couch with her mother or whatever happened in the hospital after the murder. In between whatever happened, either she is unaware of it or she deliberately lies about it. People followed the in-camera proceedings of this case, and the courtroom was tightly packed. The trial was near end, and finally, on September 28, 2023, the court found Sydney Powell guilty of all the charges and sentenced her to 15 years of life in prison. There was a mixed reaction from people about this sentence. While some people believed this was a cruel punishment, others justified it. What do you say about this? Was all the anxiety Sydney went through not because of the perfectionist behavior of her parents? Why was she not comfortable enough to share her condition with her parents? Who do you think is responsible for this murder? Sydney herself, her parents' expectations, or something else? Thanks for watching the video. Please do let us know about your opinion in the comment section. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. Also, if you liked the story, please do click the like button. Stay tuned for the next video.